to inspire you, perhaps empower you to step out of your comfort zone of the club and make a difference in the world. Because when I first realized that my careers, by the time I was age 47, my careers were very isolated careers, and I didn't realize how it kept me in a very safe, controlled environment. I was in cancer research. I worked in a laboratory. I was doing experiments on mice that had been injected with carcinogens. Very isolated business. I left on ethical reasons, but that's another whole talk. I then stumbled into Macy's, became a buyer. And for 7 years, I stayed isolated within a buying office. I had lots of contact with stores and people over the phone, but nothing allowed me to speak publicly. And because of that fear, I turned down promotions. I turned down promotions to be an administrator at Macy's, to be a store manager down at Stanford. And all those reasons that held me back all had to do with that fear of speaking. So when I left, with the birth of my first son, I thought, well, do I go back to the retail world? What do I do? And I started a quilting business because the department I was buying for at the time was fabric. And the fabric swatches that I had, I thought, what can I do with them? And I started making quilts and Christmas stockings. And I started selling to stores like Macy's. Suddenly I was on the reverse side. But because I didn't have a fear of buyers, I just walked in, said, this is what I make, this is how much I charge, how many would you like? I can deliver by this date. And it worked. And I did that for 19 years. But I want to go back and just, if you take anything out of here today, I want you to believe in your core that your voice matters, your voice is important, and your voice has power. Your voice matters because it builds self-confidence. It gives you self-esteem. When you know that what you say, someone is paying attention to. That what you say matters to you. What do you care about? I don't care how old you are. Your voice is important. It's important to hear what you care about, how you engage at work, whether it's at work or as a parent or in school or with your friends. What's important to you? Is it the environment? Is it childhood obesity? What is it that just trips your trigger and says, that matters to me, it's important that I speak about it? And in our Toastmaster meetings, we hear people talk about things they're passionate about, right? And we learn from that, whether it's our passion or not, whether we choose to act on it or not. But the third piece is your voice has power. One voice can change the world. So I want to share one story. When I was back in New York, it was on a business trip, and I happened to be a guest on this yacht sailing around Manhattan. And everybody had their dinner, and they sat at beautiful tables with the linen and the crystal, and I was sitting there, and this man comes up to me, and he says, may I sit next to you? And I said, of course. I'm Karen. What's your name? And he said, my name's Nick. I said, nice to meet you, Nick. What do you do? And he began a conversation, and he says, well, I'm the Prime Minister of New South Wales in Australia. And I also happen to be the president of the Olympic Committee, which was going to be in Australia in 2000. And I went, wow, okay, so great. I'm sitting next to a politician. That didn't float my boat. Politics are not my thing to talk about. And I said, so Nick, because everybody had been coming up to him saying, you're honorable Griner, it's so nice to see you, you're honorable this and that. That's when I asked him what he did. I said, so what is it about politics that intrigues you? And he said, no one's ever asked me that before. And he says, power. And I went, great. Now I got a power-hungry guy, who likes politics. What am I going to talk talk about. So I said, that's intriguing. So what is it about power that intrigues you? And he paused and he said, the ability to create change. To create change. To be in a position where you can pull your dream team of people together, where you can speak, influence, advise, fundraise, whatever it is, you have the ability to create change with your voice. And I thought, I like this guy. And the evening proceeded because now I was intrigued not only by the power of your voice, but the power of influence that you can take. So to me, your voice matters. It matters whether you're 10 years old or 110. So I'm going to share with you a few stories about a 10-year-old. And the first one is a girl. She's 10 years old. She is a perfect student. She is the teacher's pet. She's got great penmanship. She's there staying after school. She's coloring the mimeograph sheets that decorate the classroom. You can tell how dated this is, right? Mimeograph. And she's giving a book report, only she didn't read the book. So the night before she's due to get up in front of the classroom and write her book report, she takes the jacket of the book and she writes it down in perfect Palmer handwriting, word for word, the jacket of the book. And the next day, she gets up in front of the class and she reads it. And everybody applauds. Teacher says, oh my gosh, that was an excellent book report. Now, class, I'd like to read you something else. And she picks up the book, opens the flap, and reads the jacket, word for word. What would you do? That little girl was me, 10 years old. I learned the lesson of plagiarism, but I also learned from that day forward that I would never speak in front of a group. I was terrified. A good student still, but I never, ever got in front of a group without watery eyes and shaking boots and a red face and going through college at San Francisco State University where I just have to pop practically a whole box of Compose just to make it through. 10 years old. Fast forward now, 35 years. Here's a story of another young person. I don't put this up for you to read the whole thing, but 35 years later, an 11-year-old boy really inspired me to look at my own fear. This is my son, the youngest of 3. And 11 years old, he comes home from school and he says, you're not going to believe this, Mom, but they're going to remove the safety island from the island there where he crosses to go to school. An island that just 2 weeks before had saved his life. Because as he was standing there on the safety island, 2 cars stopped for him to continue to cross. The other car speeded up, didn't know they were stopped, crashed into them both. 3 cars collided, and he had the safety of the island. Without the island, he would have continued walking because the cars had stopped. He probably would have been dead. So he comes home at 11 years old, and I said, Kevin, they're going to remove the island. And he said, well, that's stupid. And I said, well, you could write a letter. And that's what he did. He wrote a letter. And he wrote a letter to not only the traffic board, the safety board, the police department, the planning commission. It all went to them. And they read it. And he got attention. People started paying attention. He said, I need to gather support for this. So he wrote up a petition, and he went around the entire neighborhood because that crosswalk was 3 schools, 3 grammar schools used that crosswalk. He went to the school board and spoke to the school board and said, this is crazy. This is crazy. Well, the news heard about KGO-TV. Not once, but twice. He got interviewed for the papers, and pretty soon people heard about him and started writing editorials about this traffic island. Step forward again. He is, so where do I go? Left to right? Oops. On the timeline. Now, he has the opportunity to present before the planning board in Pleasant Hill his ideas. This agenda item had been on their agenda for 3 years when they decided. It took 3 years to take the island out, decide. And he went and barely could reach the dais. He's up there with his little drawings, his visual aids, not with just one suggestion, but 2 suggestions of how they could change it, how they could improve it, not remove it, but redesign it. And he spoke from the heart. His efforts on it, he was interviewed after on TV because they were there at the city. Now keep in mind, I'm still terrified of speaking. So when he is going to the city hall, to the planning commission, and speaking before them, he's 11 years old. I'm in New York again on another business trip, and I'm going, whew! At least I'm not there to have to say anything about it. So he took his teachers and he took neighbors to support and speak on his behalf. He had a simple philosophy. His philosophy was, you talk about what matters to you. His basic philosophy was, people are more important than cars. That's what he spoke from. He spoke from a place of heart. This is crazy. And he spoke from that place. But what I want to say is, what didn't he know? He didn't learn persuasive speaking as we do in advanced manuals. All these things he did. He persuaded the city hall to put it on the agenda. He persuaded parents to sign a petition. He did a lot of persuasion. He didn't know how to do it. He wasn't in Toastmasters. He also did probably the equivalent of 5 manuals in public relations. He built public relations with students, teachers, boards, safety boards, plan commission. He spoke under fire. When he was invited to be on KGO radio, he was impromptu speaking at the bats, but under fire. Why are you doing this? What do you hope to happen? Media speech, to speak on TV, to have the camera right, the angle right. Does an 11-year-old really know that? No. Communicating on television. He did all these things. My point in showing you these is that sometimes we stay in the comfort zone of our club. And we think that we can't do something bigger or something more important outside the club because we haven't got the presentation skills down right. It holds us back. We want to do things perfectly. So that was when he was 11. It took me 2 more years before I got the courage to join Toastmasters. And this is something else, another tip that works for me, and I hope it works for some of you, is I trust my intuition. And I knew at my core that if I could overcome that fear, I could do anything in the world. I just didn't have a clue what it was. But my arm had given up from quilting for 19 years, and I knew that I was ready for change. This 11-year-old boy gave me the courage to join Toastmasters. Remember? Yeah. So what happens from that point is that when I joined Toastmasters, by speech number 4, my feedback was, you know, Karen, you got the presentation skills down. You're comfortable, you're not shaking in your boots anymore. So one tip is the first day I wore a short skirt and heels and my knees were shaking for speech number 1. Speech number 2, I wore flats and a long skirt so nobody could see my knees shaking. Little tips like that, right? You wear a short skirt now? No. I talked about just something I was having fun with. And it was adopt a family. Now, I was a volunteer in a warehouse, and I was welcoming people, bringing gifts for the families they had adopted, and sorting things, and then passing them on out to the families as they came to pick them up. I loved it there. It was cold, it was damp, but there was not a bah humbug anywhere in the place. So when I spoke about that experience, I just shared 3 real-life stories of families that needed to be adopted. 5 to 7 minute speech, no big deal, right? But I was just sharing something I was enjoying doing for the holidays. The result of that was our club adopted 3 families. And I went home, well, it was the next week by the time they decided, but I went home after that and I thought, my voice does matter. My voice is important. I shared something that needed to be heard. And my voice had the power for a club to come together and make a difference in the lives of 3 distinct, needy families. That was my aha moment in Toastmasters. And then, as I went through all of these speeches, like Kevin, it was not as important what he said or how he said it. He just got up there and put his little drawings on top and said, here's an idea. He had 90% enthusiasm and 10% knowledge. 90% enthusiasm. And you've heard the phrase, I'm sure, how it's spelled. The last 4 letters of enthusiasm is I-A-S-M. I am sold myself. And that's what he brought. He had the power to make a difference. It's the why. You share what you share at your company meeting or your club meetings. So when I talk about getting out of the club, like Jim, who was speaking next door, I thought my goal in career, because at that point now, I was comfortable speaking, and I thought, I want to be a motivational speaker. I want to be a professional speaker. And I went to National Speaker Association conference once, and they were saying, well, of all the membership, maybe about 5% of the members in NSA actually are paid to speak. Now, there's also a phrase that says, it takes 15 years to become an overnight success as a public speaker. Well, I've been in Toastmasters 18 years now, and I'm still waiting. Waiting for that call for the $10,000 an hour keynote speech. But here's where speaking changed for me, in my career, in community, and in the lives of others. In my career with Weekenders, I'll come back to this in a second. Once I joined Toastmasters, I found myself on a path that led me to direct sales. And direct sales, it's kind of like the Mary Kay, only this was in women's fashions. And I thought, like, I don't do sales. I just don't do sales. And my husband then said, the heck you don't. You're selling every day in every conversation that you have, whether it's to take a walk, a hike, volunteer at school, on the quilt project, whatever it is you're involved with, Karen, you're selling. Your enthusiasm about it. Go to a movie, go to a great new restaurant, you're selling it. You're selling the sizzle. So I decided to go into direct sales, thinking that my goal was to be the keynote speaker at a national conference. So I go to my first conference. I don't know anybody in Seattle. And I see the president of Weekenders USA by the elevator bank. Tall, statuesque woman, 6'2", I think she is. And I walked up to her and I said, hi, Rosemary, I'm Karen Leffler. I'm a brand new coordinator, haven't a clue what I'm doing. And she says, well, what do you want out of your Weekender career? And I said, very boldly, I want to be the keynote speaker at your national conference in front of thousands of women. at me and she said, no one's ever said that before. She says, but you will be. And I was. Over the course of 12 years, I was a keynote speaker and trainer, I don't know how many times at national conferences. But that career allowed me to do something even greater than get a paycheck. The gal in the white top is my dear friend Mary Jane. She and I were both managers with Weekenders, and what we did was we sold wardrobing concepts, mix and match concepts. And she called me from Mississippi after Katrina, and she said, Leffler, you need to get your butt on a plane. We have work to do down here. And I went, what are you talking about? She said, I'm working at a relief center, and these people need clothes. The teachers down here need clothes. They have been mandated to be back in the classroom after Katrina hit they had maybe a week and a half to bring in trailers for classrooms. Teachers had to be in front of the classroom to speak with a smile on their face in front of those children. Teachers that had nothing, they had no home. They had children of their own, and they were living out of the car. So this is how we arrived, and it's her fault that great things happened, because my career allowing it to be the vehicle for something different. 3 trips down to Mississippi, we went and met with schools. The teachers had no idea who we were or why we were there. They just knew that these anonymous angels were going to fit them, outfit them, and they would get clothes later on. This was the devastation. So as I looked at this, and we went around and took pictures and talked with these families who were living with nothing. I came back and shared this at my presentations, at Rotary clubs, at Kiwanis clubs. I began to use my voice to talk about the devastation down there, to say you can make a difference. We don't see the impact of what a devastation like Katrina had done. So we spoke in front of teachers. We met with them. We talked with teachers one-on-one. But here's where the real heartfelt work was that we changed lives by coming back and speaking. We met with these teachers. The one in the pink sweater, she and her sister they were getting close to retirement. They were in their 50s, and they had made the decision to pool all their retirement money, everything, to buy a home together. They lost it. They didn't have flood insurance. So there they were, 55 years old, and they had nothing. The young one, the mom, her husband was a firefighter. He was gone. They had lost their home. She has 2 children, and they lost their home. They're just out, but she doesn't even have her husband there because he's out. He's first response. So he's gone. So we got to hear their stories and hug them and talk to them. When we came back, that's where the speaking really got interesting. Because now, we, Mary Jane in Southern California and myself here, spoke to the women in our units. We spoke at the national conferences at Weekenders. We went wherever we could speak to say, come to a fashion show, hear their stories. And we began to use visual aids and movies and DVDs and bringing a voice to say, we can wardrobe these teachers. So we began, if you're speaking about something that matters to you, you start enrolling the help of others. You start delegating. You start saying, I'm going to tell you something. Can you go tell 5 other people? Can you tell 5 other people? Can you enroll? And the power of 1 becomes the power of 10, becomes the power of 100. The result of that, we did fundraising, and someone wanted me to address fundraising, and I will. But we made fundraising fun. Women sponsored the teachers. They bought the clothes. The result was we wardrobed 800 teachers in Katrina. But when we were there, each teacher got her own box. It was like a little gift. You know, we didn't lay any more work on the faculty to say, divvy